Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It has been a while since I did like an actual planned out sit down video, and I have missed doing it, but I've honestly just been so busy during the week that Fridays sneak up and I don't have anything planned. But today I want to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I've really enjoyed reading books about it throughout the years, and I see a lot of people asking questions about this. The topic for today is basically Christian dating and relationships, and just how can a young woman who wants to be married relate to guys. So a little bit of background: I am almost 21, and basically since I was really little I wanted to get married, but especially since I was 10 I was interested in guys and really liked being friends with guys, and have always had that as a goal to get married. You know, I wanted to get married even before I graduated high school, and so that's always been a passion of mine, and I've struggled a lot with emotions. I'm a very emotional, outgoing person, and I've always struggled with attaching my heart to just people in general. And so this has been a topic that I've had to work on a lot in my own sanctification, and I've looked to counselors and I've looked to a lot of books to give me some wisdom on this and to point to what is the biblical guidelines for wanting to be married and having that desire in your heart, but yet guarding your heart and acting in a godly way towards people around you. I really have a passion for helping younger girls that I see who are in this same kind of stage, girls who do want to get married and they're 15, 16, but they're waiting for the right time and they're trying to figure out what is God's design for their life. So I really want to disciple young women in my life personally, but also I've thought this video would be helpful to a lot of girls and even moms that I've seen asking questions on what books can I give my daughter to read that can be helpful on this topic. So I'm gonna go through this stack of books that I have right here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books specifically on the topic of relationships, and then I have 2 that I think are just really helpful for your sanctification during that time. So I'll get to those at the end of the video. So I kind of have these books in order of when you should read them in your life, and the order I think that they would be most helpful in, starting from the youngest age up to when you're getting closer to the age of dating and actually being able to have that relationship. So the first book to start out with, I talked about this one a lot on my channel. I've read it twice already and just really recommend it and use it in a lot of conversations and counseling, and that is It's Not That Complicated by the Botkin sisters. Now, the sisters, I don't know a lot about them, and I know that they are connected to the whole family integrated movement, but I have read this twice, once very recently, and I have not seen any concerning theology in there, and I found a lot of very helpful things, not only in my own life, but I think it could even apply to marriages, to any kind of relationship. So I have really gleaned a lot from this book. So I would recommend this to maybe starting 13 to 15, as you start to get older and you are becoming friends with guys, and sometimes it can be tricky to navigate those relationships with guys. So the subtitle says How to Relate to Guys in a Healthy, Sane, and Biblical Way. The back of the book talks about if you've ever been confused about friendship with boys, how do you handle crushes, how friendly is too friendly. This was something that I really struggled with a lot when I was younger. Just how do you just have those relationships with a guy, even if you do like him, you have a crush on him, whatever, how do you act and treat him like a fellow believer? And so I think they just do a really great job about explaining how women were created, how if we look at Genesis 2, we see that God did create us for a relationship, that we were created to serve man. So how can we live that out even in our singleness, and how can we start training ourselves to be that humble servant even now? So they start out talking like that. They talk a lot about emotions, about how relationships work, and really the thing that has stood out to me a lot is just the fact that guys are people too. They have a chapter on that, and the fact that guys are believers, and in the Bible, we are called as believers to build one another up, to be growing, and to stimulating one another to good works. And so whether it is a 60-year-old woman or an 18-year-old guy or a 10-year-old girl, it doesn't matter. We are all called to encourage one another and to grow together. And so if your interactions with guys are not growing them in sanctification, or if you're just refusing to interact with them at all, then that's problematic and you are not living out the commands of loving one another and serving one another. And so that was really helpful and convicting to me, just to think about the fact that if a guy walks in the church doors, that is your brother in Christ, and you need to encourage him and you need to welcome him just like you would any other person that walked in the doors. And then I learned a lot about just how do you talk with a guy and how do you show that you're interested in him as a person. And that has helped me even with my brothers. How can I have good relationships with them and be able to understand what their interests are? You know, if my brother really likes Legos, and he loves talking about that, and he does that with a lot of his life, even if I don't have any interest in that, I need to show that I care about him as a person by asking him about that, by even doing some research on my own and learning about those things. That's a way that I can bless him and be an encouragement to him. There's a good section on parents in here and how you can use the wisdom of your parents and lean on them during this time in your life. There's a section on biblical femininity and how the feminist movement has really messed with how guys act and their assertiveness and their pursuing of women. We've kind of dumbed them down through the feminist movement, and so I really appreciated the chapter on that. It talks about just seeking God's will, not trusting ourselves, and following our own heart. And then it does talk about, okay, how do you get in a relationship and how should you navigate that? What is wisdom? You know, when is just friends okay? How far is too far? Things like that. And then there is a section on matchmaking as well. And then there's a chapter on how can you grow yourself as a woman that a man would want to marry, and then being content in this season of your life. So I spent a long time talking about this just because it covers so many good topics and is written in a great way. One thing that I really like about this is that they talk to their brothers and to their guy friends and get some quotes from them. So there's a lot of little quote boxes in here on, okay, what's a guy's opinion on a flirtatious woman in the church? You know, what do they see? And it's, you know, can be really convicting because their friend will say, yeah, that's not really someone we want to hang out with, and that's really detrimental to our own walk with Christ. And so seeing that from a guy's perspective was super helpful as well. So if you can't tell, this really did help me a lot with how I interact with guys, and I do wish I would have read it sooner because I think it would have been really helpful, but I hope that someone else can benefit from reading this book. Then the second book is one that I did go through with my mom when I was 16, I believe. And this is Before You Meet Prince Charming by Sarah Malley. Again, this book is connected to a lot of the family integrated movement, but as far as I remember, there wasn't a lot of problematic theology in there. It could have been connected to the whole purity culture thing, but I think if you take it rightly, then it can be very helpful. And this one is a little bit more cheesy, but I do appreciate that it is written to younger girls. It is written in a very delicate way. There's nothing that would not be appropriate for younger girls. And she does write a kind of an allegory using the princess and the king and alligators and knights, and it kind of gives each chapter has a story, an allegory that goes with the topic that she's talking about. So it's a little cheesy sometimes, but it kind of is helpful to have that illustration of what's happening. There's chapters in here on desiring the very best for marriage, dangers within the dating system, guarding your heart, could he be the one, romantic dreams, when God says wait, how parents can help, have a little life purpose bigger than marriage, dreams must die, reserved for one, delighting in the Lord, and know that God arranges marriage. So the things I think that I drew the most from in this book are definitely the chapter on guarding your heart. That was really eye-opening to me because I never really thought before about the emotional purity and how giving your heart away to someone can be just as important as physical purity, and that can be something that stays with you for a long time. If you do give part of your heart away to someone, that's going to affect you for years to come and even can affect later relationships. And so being really careful with that was really important for me to learn. And I think that's really easy for girls to become emotionally attached because we are designed that way, to emotionally attach ourselves to other people and especially to guys. And so this book really helped me with considering, okay, how am I just letting my emotions go and not guarding my heart? Somewhere in here where they mentioned first, and okay, what are you doing, your first gift that you give to a guy, your first note, your first, and not that you're being legalistic and saying, oh, I can never do that with a guy because I don't know if I'm going to marry him, but just considering that and thinking about honoring your own future husband and also honoring his future wife, because you don't know who you're going to marry. And so whenever you just so flippantly buy guys gifts or flippantly go on dates with guys, just considering, is this someone that I can see myself marrying, or am I just easily giving away my first whatever with this person? And then another chapter I think that really stood out to me in this was just having a life purpose bigger than marriage. That yes, we are called to serve men, and most Christians do end up getting married, but not setting your heart on that and expecting to get married by the time you're 16 or 18 or whatever your dream is, just realizing that there are things that you need to be doing right now in the season of waiting, and that being married is not going to fulfill all your hopes and dreams. So right now is a great time to be content and to be satisfied with God and to be serving in the church, because that is the eternal thing that's going to last, and you don't know when you're going to get married. And so if you're constantly looking for your life to be fulfilled in marriage, you might be waiting a long time, and then you'll have a lot of wasted years. So those were things that I learned from this, and I think this is a really great book to go through with your mom. There's a go further section in each chapter, little like homework things to do, like make a list of characteristics that you're looking for in a man, write a letter to someone who is guy obsessed, just helping you to really take what's said in the book and practically apply it. And even though I read this book probably 5 years ago, I still remember a lot of the things in there just because I worked through it as a book study. So I think this would be a really great book to go through the mother and daughter and be able to discuss those things. Then the next book is one I don't really have much to say about. I can't remember really enjoying it. I went through it with a friend, but I just wanted to include all the books that I've read on this topic in here, and that is Love Defined by Kristen Clark and Bethany Baird. This is someone who lives kind of near me, and I have met them, and I appreciate a lot of the things that they do for young women who don't have a good role model in their life, maybe don't have a mother who is teaching them all of these things. So I did enjoy reading this book and learn some things from it, but honestly it didn't stand out as that big to me. I think it's really great, just basic book, like if you wanted to go through a group book study on what are relationships, what is femininity, how do we even think about those things, especially if you are in the world and there's a lot of outside influences that are not godly, the whole dating culture, then this book could be really helpful for just laying that groundwork. There's a section on Happily Ever Disaster, then Bringing Back True Love. Part 3 is Single and Waiting to Mingle, and Part 4 is Working Through the Nitty Gritty, and then Part 5 is Living Well on This Side of the Altar. So basically talking about what's wrong with our modern relationships, then how can we look at love and at femininity in a godly way, then what do you do right now when you're single, how can you really work through being friends with a guy, what does a relationship look like, and then there's a section on what do married women want you to know, what is that advice. One thing that really stood out to me in this was the merry-go-round of relationships that they have. Where is that chapter? They have steps of what a bad relationship looks like, and honestly I can look at my life and see myself doing a lot of these things. Step 1, catch the right guy. Step 2, coast on infatuation. Step 3, concentrate on your feelings. Step 4, count on him to satisfy you. Step 5, cry when it fails, then go back again to the beginning and do it all again. And I think a lot of girls can relate to that and can see at some point in their life that they did that, and it's a really sad place to be in, and you don't see any joy and you're constantly discontent. So I'm grateful that I had people in my life who helped me with that, I could turn to the scriptures, and that I could read books like this that helped me to turn from that merry-go-round, because it's not fun, and I don't really want younger girls to have to experience that. So that was something that stood out from this book. So if you're looking for like a general book study to go through, I think this is a helpful one. Then one that's kind of general, just about marriage and preparing for marriage. And I think this can be helpful to read when you're not in a relationship, or even in the beginning of dating. It can be a great one to go through together. I've heard of people going through it together. And that is Marry Wisely, Marry Well by Ernie Baker. Ernie Baker is a counselor for ACBC, the association that I'm getting my counseling certification from. And he teaches at the Masters University. He does like the marriage and family class. And I really enjoyed his teaching, and I enjoy a lot of things from this book. It is laid out as a blueprint for a house. And so you start out with the foundation, then you do all of the structure, and then you start filling in the rooms. And this one was really helpful. I went through this as a book study with a friend. So you lay the good foundation of building on wisdom, knowing Christ, being wise about even who you're being attracted to, understanding marriage. Then you build that first floor. Okay, while you're single, how do you live your life? What do you look for in a man? Relationship skills, character traits. Then knowing when you're ready for marriage. When is the wise time to get married? How do you know? And then he has a section talking about how should you date? Should you court? Should there be arranged marriages? He kind of addresses all of those. And then you put on the roof. What's the result of building wisely? How do you have a marriage that glorifies God? So I think I did a review on this back last year, and I think this one can be super helpful even for people who are married and just don't really know how to lay that good foundation for their marriage and how to be growing. This is a really good book. And I found this helpful for, okay, what do I look for in a spouse, but also what can I be growing on? I really like the chapter in here on character traits and on relationship skills, and how can I be growing in those skills, but also what kind of things should I look for in other people, and what is our motivation for relationships. So having a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, forgiveness, love. How does your communication? And then I do like at the end of every chapter, they have these questions on like, does this person that you're dating live up to these things that we've talked about in this chapter? And are you preparing in that right now, depending on what season of your life that you're in? How are you doing in these relationship skills? Or questions on wisdom and God's will. Asking questions about yourself, and then asking about a potential spouse. And so I think this one is really helpful to go through maybe with a guy that you're dating, because it's written to both, and you can learn a lot from here and touch on a lot of good subjects. So I would highly recommend this one, and I have used it in counseling before. And then the last one on this whole relationship topic is Letters to a Romantic on Dating by Sean Perrin and Spencer Harmon. This is another book that was written through the Association of Biblical Counselors, and I have listened to a couple of lectures, sermons that they did on this topic, and I just really appreciate their perspective and how they're not scared to talk about the hard topics. This one is written in letter format, and it's fun to read. You can also go through this when you are in a relationship. I just read it to be prepared because there's a lot of good topics on here. For example, it starts out just talking about singleness, marriage versus singleness, and I found those chapters really encouraging. How can you prepare right now? How can you have sorrow and joy in your singleness whenever your friends are getting married and getting engaged? How can you have contentment in dating? Then how should you date a non-Christian? Going on a first date, how do you decline a date? Should we be in a relationship? How can you include your parents in this relationship? What if they have a sexual history? Do we have a bad relationship? Should we break up? on kissing. How can we express our love before we're even engaged or married? How about if you're too young for marriage? So it's kind of like just going to your best friend or your a counselor that you have, and just being able to ask them questions, and they just write it in a really loving, simple way. The chapters are pretty short, and they use a lot of good scripture and draw a lot of good wisdom. So I would definitely highly recommend this one to anyone who is single or dating, to read this, to be ready, and maybe even go through it in your relationship, because it's short, and I think it just leads you in a really great direction. And then there is another book, Letters to Romantic on Engagement, and then Letters to Romantic on the First Years of Marriage, and I think these books are really helpful to read. So that's 5 books that talk about the topic of this whole relationship with guys. How do you relate to them, and what do you do, once you start getting to that dating process? But whenever you are in that singleness season, maybe you were dating someone and you broke up, maybe you've never been in a relationship with someone, what can you be doing right now, and how can you best be serving God and having the right attitude towards him? Because if you don't work on these things in your life that you're struggling with, like contentment or various things right now, whenever you're not in a relationship, it's just going to be so much harder later on to deal with those things, and then it'll be affecting someone else, even if you're married, if you have kids, and there's going to be things that you're going to have to work on later on in your life. So right now is the perfect time to be able to be growing in sanctification, and I'm really grateful for that, because right now I don't have a ton of distractions, and I can just focus on my morning Bible reading time, and I can focus on dealing with these sins that I have. So I picked out 2 books that I think are really helpful just for this whole idea of being sanctified in your singleness and understanding a right relationship with other people and how to just serve others. So the first one is When People Are Big and God is Small, Overcoming Peer Pressure, Codependency, and the Fear of Man. This is by Ed Welch, and this does deal a lot with that whole codependency, when you have this guy that you really like and you're best friends, and then all of a sudden you want to see him every day and you just become really dependent on him. This book is really helpful for that, because it just talks about how that really does come from a fear of man and from being obsessed with man and not focusing on God and the gifts that he has given you and growing in him. So it talks about the fear of the Lord and what do we feel like we need, but what are our real needs? How does God satisfy those needs that we have? It talks about why we fear others, how we can love our brothers and sisters, how loving others really helps us to overcome the need for others to love us whenever we're focused on them. So I think this one's really helpful no matter what phase of life you're in. Just if you struggle with pleasing people or being codependent, this is really helpful. And then another one that's helped me just with friendships in general was this Getting to the Heart of Friendships by Amy Baker. I believe this one's also recommended by ACBC. And I like the format of this one. It just talks about how as girls, we really want to have those close relationships, whether you're older, you're married, or you're single. We do want to have close relationships with other women. But how can we avoid being a bad friend? And so she goes through 6 different types of friends: the approval-oriented friend, the control-oriented friend, the protection-oriented friend, the rightness-oriented, pleasure-oriented, comfort-oriented, and prestige-oriented. So all the different kinds of bad friendships bad friends that we can be. And something that really stood out to me on here was the protection-oriented friend. Whenever you're scared to be friends with someone, because what if they hurt you? And so in the second half of the book, she gives what are the biblical responses to each of these orientations that we might have in friendships. And with the protection-oriented one, she just talked about how important it is for us to think about other people. If we change our mindset on friendship and think, how can I be serving this person instead of how can they serve me, then it won't matter if we get hurt, if they do something mean to us, because our goal wasn't to have this bosom friend that supported us in every little thing that we did. Our goal was to push that person to Christ and to encourage them. And if they decide to walk away, then that's on them. You've done all you could as a Christian, as a fellow believer and sister in the church. And then if they walk away, so what? You move on to the next person and see how you can bless them. So that was really helpful to me, just reading through this and seeing Okay, what is a genuine friend? And how, you know, Peter says that our faith is proved genuine by trials. And she even has this little chart right here. Should I publicly discuss my struggles and failures? You know, if you're scared to open up to people and to tell them what you're struggling with, you can go through this chart. Am I reluctant to share my struggles and failures because I don't want anyone to know how sinful I am? Is it just people pleasing? Is this an area in which I'm currently struggling and failing? All these different questions, and just how can you best glorify God in when you're sharing things. And sometimes you do share things and you just are vulnerable and you might get hurt, but I think C.S. Lewis said, if you love deeply, then you will get hurt, and that's just what is going to happen. And so just not being fearful of that, but thinking about helping others and loving others. So this is really helpful for any kind of friendships. So I'm pretty sure this video turned out to be a lot longer than I expected it to be, but you can probably tell that this is something that I am passionate about and really enjoy talking about, because I have learned so much just through reading and through observing other people, and I think it's a thing that girls sometimes feel like they have to struggle alone with, and they think it's just normal. But I think there is an answer, and there is a way to be able to experience singleness and the longing for marriage with a biblical mindset, and be able to enjoy it and be able to understand that God did create us for marriage, and so we can appreciate those feelings and they're not bad. But how can we not just rely on feelings and be so absorbed with that and not serving others? So I hope that this video was helpful, and that you can learn a lot. And if you have any questions or any other book recommendations, I would love to talk with you down in the comments. I would love to help anyone who is in this singleness season and just would like to chat about it. You can leave it down in the comments or message me on Instagram. So I will see you guys back on this channel later, and thank you so much for following along and for watching my videos. Bye. Oh, does it look good? I like how close it is, like head and shoulders. Shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. No, I was talking about the shampoo, Head and Shoulders. I guess. Hi guys! This is me trying to loosen up, okay?